Greetings, everyone. It's so nice to be with you today. Now we'll explore how various cultures around the world have celebrated the fall equinox throughout history, and we'll talk about the significance of this period. So first, think of what you associate with the fall equinox. I'm sure something immediately comes to mind. Maybe it's the harvest. Fall is typically known with the harvest, which is gathering crops or collecting the fruits of what we planted earlier in the year. And we're going to be talking more about that on Saturday during the symposium that I'll be sharing. So the fall harvest, you may be familiar with the harvest moon, which is the full moon that is the nearest to the fall equinox. And this year that falls on September 29th. When you think of the fall equinox, you may think of the changing of seasons, and you may be reminded that on this day, all around the world, the time of daytime and nighttime are approximately the same. An equinox is an astronomical event in which the plane of Earth's equator passes through the center of the sun. And this occurs twice each year around March 20th and around September 22nd. And again, on the equinox, day and night are of approximately equal duration all around the world. And then after the fall equinox that day, until winter, the days will be shorter than the nights in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, it's the opposite. And the autumn equinox occurs in a few days for us this year when the sun enters the zodiacal sign of Libra, the balance, which of course is an appropriate symbol of the balance between day and night. And this is an important time of change and transformation from one season to another. So we have a few days of summer left, and then we enter fall. Many ancient cultures were aware of this time of balance. From earliest times, the equinoxes, both in the spring and in the fall, have been considered of major significance by humanity because they mark the changing of seasons, which is especially important in ancient civilizations. So I invite you now to think for a moment, why would it be important to recognize these changes, the changes between seasons? Just think about that for a moment. When we pause to observe the equinoxes and solstices, these 4 times of the year, it brings our awareness to these natural cycles and to the much bigger world around us. So we start thinking in terms of more than an 8-hour work day or a Monday through Friday work week, or even a year. We don't realize how we have shortened our experience of time. When ancient people had different demands on their time, it created a completely different perspective for them. I mean, it's hard to not think of an 8-hour workday or of a work week, but this would have no meaning at all for ancient people. Often they were looking at much more grand, much more vast cycles. I remember in around the year 2000, a member told me that he had written a letter to the President of the United States, encouraging the president to plan for the next 100 years, to plan the future of the country for the next 100 years. And it made so much sense. However, as we probably all witnessed, many governmental and political decisions are made on what will get a person elected in the next election cycle. So that might be 2 years, or in the United States, at the longest, it would be 6 years. So that isn't really very forward thinking. When we think in more grand scales, it gives us a different perspective. And again, the pauses at the time of the equinoxes and the solstices give us a chance to take a moment to realize that we're going through these cycles. You may have heard of the seventh generation principle, and this is based on a Native American philosophy that the decisions that we make today should result in a sustainable world 7 generations into the future. And this came from a confederation of Native peoples, and the confederation, often the people are called the Iroquois, and the translation of this group of different tribes working together is the people of the Longhouse. And this confederacy is credited with really strongly contributing an influence on the American Constitution, because Benjamin Franklin had great respect for this system of government. And again, worldwide, the autumn equinox is associated with the harvest, with the remembrance of times past, and appreciation for those who have gone before us. So now we're going to explore some ancient civilizations where the fall equinox was important to them, and we'll begin in what is now Ireland, in an area called Loughcrew, with a structure that was built over 5,200 years ago. The structure that you see is older than Stonehenge. It's about 50 miles northwest of what is now Dublin. And it was rediscovered in 1863 by Eugene Conwell while he was in this area on a picnic. And then he made it his life's work to investigate Loughcrew. The significance of the fall equinox related to this monument that's made of stone was rediscovered in 1980. So in this area, there are more than 30 ancient cairns, C-A-I-R-N, cairns, which are ancient stone monuments. And they're piles of stones. People put stones here, shaping them into a dome or a pinnacle. And they were built for a specific purpose. They were a tomb, and they were built in honor of people who had already gone through transition, generally as their final resting places. And we see what it looks like now, but this was once covered with white quartz. These cairns often had interior passages and chambers inside that were used for communal burials. And they were usually built in places of prominence so that you could see them from a distance, and so that they could be seen from a distance. So next we'll see what this looks like from above. So we saw what it looks like if we were standing next to it, and this is what it looks like above. There is, where you see on the right, within the structure, that's where the tombs were. And our next image shows a cross section. So you see the entrance to the right here, and there is this passageway that is 29 feet long. And we'll look at the next slide here. This is what it looks like above. So you have we're looking at that passage that we just saw, and it was discovered that at sunrise on the spring and fall equinoxes, the sun shines in that passageway to the center of this monument made of stone. And often the opening is described as a crucifix. The first time I saw this, though, I thought it looked like a human body. And maybe that's because I've seen so many drawings of the Temple of Man at Luxor, Egypt from above. So I'm curious, the yellow line there shows how the light shines in to the end of the passageway. So I'm just wondering if this could have something to do with the pineal gland, but I don't want to project onto that. So our next slide shows the sun coming in on the morning of the fall equinox, and it shines on what we're going to see next here, which is the center stone, and it has these petroglyphs, these ancient drawings that again are aligned perfectly so that just on 2 days during the year, or 2 periods during the year, at the time of the spring equinox and the fall equinox, these images are illumined. And nobody knows the exact meaning of these petroglyphs. Also, this is on a very big stone, and on the top of that, you can look underneath, and this area too is only illumined at the time of the equinoxes, and it shows even more symbols underneath. So it's fascinating to consider what these ancient people may have been communicating. These were places where people gathered for rituals and to celebrate their ancestors, to celebrate their deities, and to show their reverence for nature. And this took some effort and engineering. There's another stone monument like this called Newgrange that's similar in size, and it's been estimated that it would have taken 300 people 20 years to build that. And today we have beliefs about what happens to people when they die. And these cairns, these stone monuments, may provide a clue about how these Neolithic people viewed death. Why the spring and fall equinoxes? The Latin word that equinox comes from means equal night. So it's equal night and equal day. And in a number of traditions, there at the time of the equinoxes and the solstices, it provides a portal into the spirit world. It's a time where, it's a period where time stands still a little bit, just long enough between the transition to allow entry into another world. So I invite you now to just think, what might it mean that the rising sun shines through this dark passageway to illumine these symbols, these petroglyphs? Just think about what they might mean. So again, Loughcrew is in what is now Ireland. And now we're going to move to the Mayan pyramid at Chichen Itza in the state of Yucatan in Mexico. And on every equinox, the fall and the spring, the sun of the late afternoon, through a play of light and shadow, creates the illusion of a snake undulating slowly down the northern staircase. So you can see the serpent here, and the next image shows a side view, and it actually looks like a snake undulating, like a snake moving down that long platform that you see there. And this is a Maya monument, a pyramid, and they were known for their advanced understanding of time, which they acquired through their study of astronomy, and which allowed for the development of a complex calendar system. And this area, which is in Mexico and Central America, the history started there a long time ago, about 1000 BCE, and it was the firm end of the Mayans with the arrival of Hernán Cortés and his Spanish fleet in 1521 of our era. So this civilization existed for 2,500 years. And their strongest period, their classic period, was from 600 to 900 of our era. And then for some reason, there was a collapse. And no one's sure why in the 900s, the Mayan civilization collapsed. People think it might be from a combination of factors like climate change, which led to drought and crop failures, probably overpopulation and political unrest. And after this collapse, the Maya civilization continued to this area, to the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula, where Chichen Itza emerged as a really important city. And today it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So this diamondback snake is composed of about 7 triangular shadows that are cast by the terraces of the pyramid. And the pyramid's about 98 feet high. This temple was built, this pyramid was built around 1200 of our era. So I invite you to consider for a moment what it would have taken to create this appearance that stone is moving, that stone is undulating with the change in the sun and the shadows. It's undulating down these ramps, and it only does this at certain periods of the year. How could someone have figured that out? I also invite you to consider, why would a culture go through such work to create a phenomenon like this? The serpent, it's known, was very important in the Maya tradition. And this feathered serpent joins the heavens, earth, and the underworld, and joins day and night. So the serpent that you see there was really important to the Maya people. And it joins heavens, earth, and the underworld, and it also joins day and night. Next, we're going to look at a mound that is in Cahokia, and this is just outside of St. Louis, Missouri. The Mississippian culture thrived from the year 700 to the late 1300s of our era. And the Cahokia Mounds are the largest archaeological site in North America. And this too is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is astonishing. It once contained 120 human-built mounds. And of the Mississippian culture, which thrived in North America, this was the most important site for the Mississippian culture. It's where the king lived. In the year 1250, Cahokia had 20,000 inhabitants. And at that time, it was larger than London. So the connection with the equinoxes and solstices is, we'll see that in the next image here, which shows all the way over to the left. You see the little blue arrow, that is a wood hinge. So it is a circle, and what they found in the early 1960s was post holes in the ground with a few posts still nearby, but they saw these holes in the ground from ancient times. And no one knew that this existed there. They were planning to build a highway, an interstate highway in this area. And so archaeologists were frantically rushing to save archaeological information from this area that was going to be destroyed. So fortunately, after these amazing archaeological founds were discovered in the early 1960s, the highway was rerouted. There were as many as 5 of these wood henges at Cahokia, built over a period of about 200 years. So clearly they were important. And one would view, the view was from the center of the circle. And in this image, you can see the other blue arrow shows Monk's Mound, which is the mound that I showed you previously. So it's a massive mound. The king would live there, and there were rituals that were performed there. And when the sun would rise on the equinoxes, if you were standing in the center of that circle, it would rise just above the mound. So there were other posts between the solstice posts, probably mark special festival dates related to agriculture. And the remaining posts have, no one knows for sure what their function was, other than symbolically forming a circle and then enclosing the area in order to have sacred ceremonies. So again, the most spectacular sunrise occurs at the time of the equinoxes, when the sun rises due east. And the post marking these sunrises aligns with the front of Monk's Mound. And so it looks as though this mound is giving birth to the sun. So I invite you to consider, if you were part of this Mississippian culture in the 1200s, again, living with 20,000 other people and being in the midst of your king and worshiping the sun, what type of ceremonies do you imagine would have been conducted in this wood henge? And what message do you think you'd be trying to convey with this wood henge? Okay, next. Here you can see what it looks like. These are modern versions of the posts, and we'll continue. And this is what the sun looks like rising on the fall equinox. And Cahokia does allow people to come and observe this. Ceremonies are not performed in honor of the native people, but you are welcome to go and observe this. So next, we're going to travel to an area that is near Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. And this is called the Fajada Butte. This area is known as the Sun Dagger. And this is from a description about this, about what we're going to see in a moment. The ancestral Pueblo people who lived in what is called the Four Corners region of the US, it's called that now, built an amazing astronomical device probably about 1,000 years ago. And in 1977, an amateur archaeologist and professional photographer and sculptor named Anna Sofauer happened to observe what occurred on the fall equinox, and then she connected it with the other equinox and the 2 solstices. She came back on the summer solstice, and we're going to see here now, there are 3 large stone slabs leaning against the cliff, which channel light and shadow markings onto 2 spiral petroglyphs on the wall. So we'll move to the next slide here. So I think most people would just look at that and say, isn't that an interesting stack of stones against this wall here? The light and shadow phenomenon intended to mark the arrival of the sun at the solstices and equinoxes. So now we'll see an image. This is on the top of that butte that we were just looking at. So first of all, just getting up there would have been quite a feat. Then noticing something special about these slabs of stone that are leaning against the cliff wall, and noticing it at the time of the fall equinox, and then coming back on the summer solstice and seeing it on all four, 2 and 2 equinoxes and solstices. So next we'll see on the summer solstice, a shaft of light looks like a dagger cuts through the center of the spiral petroglyph. And then it slowly moves downward until 20 minutes later, it slips off the face of the cliff. So you most definitely have to have good luck in timing to be there during this short period. So the summer solstice, a shaft of light that looks like a dagger, cuts through the center of this spiral petroglyph, and then it slowly moves downward until 20 minutes later, it slips off the face of the cliff. And we'll look at the next slide now. So then on the winter solstice, something similar happens, but it is two shafts of light that bracket the spiral. So in this image, you can see the top image shows the summer solstice, the bottom, the winter solstice. And on the fall and spring equinoxes, it cuts through the right side of the spiral. And a second smaller shaft bisects the coil on a smaller snake petroglyph next to it. So again, we have the sacred serpent, which for a moment, think about what a serpent could symbolize. What does a serpent symbolize to you? There are a lot of things that are amazing about snakes. And one that stands out for a lot of people is the transformation that takes place when a snake or a serpent sheds its skin. So maybe this has something to do with the transformation that occurs at these propitious times between the seasons, when the sun almost seems to, at the solstices, it seems like it stands still. And at the equinoxes, it's still the time of transformation when there is equal night and day, almost. It's not exactly equal, but almost. And an opportunity to have a glimpse into, or an entrance into, another plane of awareness. So this area was used between the 10th and the 13th centuries. And in our next image, we'll see, you can see how remote this was. This butte, there is no source of water in this area. And the remains are about 300 feet tall. And there's still the remains of a, so there are the remains of a ramp that goes up the southwestern side of the butte that is 690 feet long. So this ramp was 300 feet high. It went all the way to the top, and 690 feet long. So somebody thought something important was happening up there. So I invite you now to think, what would it take to have this type of knowledge? What would it take to have this type of knowledge? To be able to engineer what we've just looked at, a pyramid, and these stone slabs. And a snake going down the side of a ramp. And cairns, these monuments made of stone that someone figured out exactly where to put the passageway so that the light only shines in at a certain time. And in these cases, around the time of the fall equinox. One thing I think it would take is long periods of observation. And in a moment, we're going to begin a meditation. But think about what's possible when we have longer periods of observation. What can you better understand by having the time and the mind space for longer periods of observation? When we view time more than just a work day or a work week, there are ancient texts describing cycles of about 26,000 years. People weren't thinking just let's plan our country's future 100 years from now or 7 generations. You know, that's your child's 7 times. But longer periods of time. And there were people who have gone before us who invested that type of time, who understood the value of longer periods of observation. We're going to practice an exercise related to this now. So if you would please close your eyes. And take 3 deep breaths, becoming more relaxed with each exhalation. Now return to your regular breath, making a nice, normal breath that you focus your awareness on. The Rosicrucian teachings present many natural laws to us so that we can consider them, so we can see if they make sense to us, so that we can better live in harmony with them. One way we do this is by observing natural cycles, such as the equinoxes and the solstices. And this reminds us that we are part of something vast and grand. Not just 8 hours of work or 24 hours of a day or 5 days of a work week, but centuries and millennia. And the people who lived during these periods and what they observed and shared. Let us take a moment now to give thanks to past initiates who perpetuated the mystery traditions so that we could learn and benefit from them today. These include mystics and philosophers from ancient times. For example, in the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, the Pythagoreans, the Essenes, the Gnostics, Neoplatonists, Kabbalists, alchemists, Martionists, and Rosicrucians of the past. All of these traditions have contributed to what we study in the Rosicrucian teachings today. Let's take a moment to think with gratitude of the founders of the Rosicrucian Order Amor. And to all those who have served the order so that we can benefit from it today. Those who were well known and those who tirelessly gave their service without being known. Now take a moment to remember and thank the person who introduced you to the Rosicrucian order or to mysticism. It could be someone you know personally, or perhaps the author of a book that influenced you. Take a moment now to give thanks to that person. In a moment, we're going to send thoughts to Rosicrucians who will come in the future. And I'd like to share a little bit about this first. In the 1930s, H. Spencer Lewis wrote a special monograph to all members in the 12th degree at that time, asking them to send thoughts of courage, strength, health, and peace profound to Rosicrucians who would come in the future. He mentioned some specific years. One was around the year 2000. Then he mentioned 3 or 4 specific years, but he said in general, send thoughts to Rosicrucians who will come in the future. So let's do this now. Let's send our thoughts to Rosicrucians who will come in the future, someone we probably will never meet. But send your thoughts of courage, of strength, of health and well-being, and of peace profound. To that Rosicrucian of the future. So mote it be.